Hello everyone, Chag Sameach. It's already Hanukkah here in Israel. It's a sad day, as Gila has mentioned. I also have been in Sydney for some time, not like you, but I was teaching at Sydney University, and it's very sad to hear. I was in love with the Jewish community there, and it really breaks my heart. And I thought, since it's Hanukkah and we deal with Jewish art, I'll take a few minutes to say something about Hanukkah. And one of the Hanukkah lamps that I selected is one that we lit this night. That's behind me. And I selected this one because of its symbolic meaning to the events of the day. And I want to show it to you for a second. Here is the lamp when we lit it about 2 hours ago. And here is the lamp without any candles and in daylight. And you can see how beautiful it is, this Hanukkah lamp, one of my collection. And it's produced in Israel in a very dramatic year, the first Hanukkah after independence, 1949. And I love this Hanukkah lamp especially because it tells the story of the new state and connects it with Hanukkah in such an interesting and historical way. Look at the back panel of this lamp. I'll show you now a detail of it. And it shows a large crown, and there is here the two words Keter Malchut, the crown of kingdom, which is the crown of the new state of Israel. You see the emblem of the state, you see the emblem of IDF, and two shofarot are announcing the end of days, more or less. One shofar is here, one is here. The emblem of the state that is here was just selected a few months after the state was created on May 15, 1948. There was a committee to select the emblem for the state, and after a few months they came with this emblem that is shown on this Hanukkah lamp for the first time ever in history, that we have this emblem of Israel on a Hanukkah lamp to show that this is the new kingdom, as I said. And on the other side, above it, here above the Hanukkah, the menorah, there is the emblem of IDF that was also just selected at that time with the sword and olive branch, which is, of course, in contrast to what was in diaspora, you can say, for at least the last 1,000 years, when you would show the emblems of the state in which the Jews lived under different rulers. Here, for example, one from Tsarist Russia, and it says in memory of the miracle of Hanukkah, and it has the double-headed eagle of the Russian Tsar, because the Jews were in Russia at the time and they wanted to show tribute to the governor. And it's the same in Poland or in Slovakia and Bohemia, and also in Iraq and Syria and so on. So now it's the first time that you are able to show your nation connected with this holiday, the holiday of the victory of the Maccabees and the liberation of Jerusalem. And so the menorah that is shown here is also very symbolic. The menorah that was selected to be the emblem of the state. You all recognize it, of course. It comes from the Arch of Titus, which connects us to the topic of today, because we speak about Rome. So here is the Arch of Titus to commemorate the fall of Judea by the Romans in year 70 AD, when Jerusalem was taken over by the Romans. Here is the Arch of Titus. I show it to you again. And here is the image that is the basis for everything. This is actually what we see here, are the Roman soldiers carrying the menorah that the Maccabees have put in the temple. The last time the menorah was put before the destruction was by Judah and his brothers, the Maccabees. And this is the menorah that Titus has taken from Jerusalem. And this is the menorah that we see on the arch, and the emblem of the state, of course, is not by accident that this was selected to show now that the menorah is returning back to Jerusalem. Actually, even before the emblem was selected on the day of the United Nations meeting on November 29th, and the decision of partition of Palestine into two homelands for the Palestinians and for the Jews. There was a parade in the city of Rome with the people from the ghetto, from the Jewish quarter of Rome, about which we'll speak in a few minutes, coming to the Arch of Titus, because this has been the symbol of the diaspora for 2,000 years for them, and now it ended. So they came here with the chief rabbi of Rome at the time, David Prado, and they were reciting here, I'm sorry, again, that's not going. Okay, and they were reciting here the Psalm 137 that speaks about these ideas of returning back to Jerusalem. By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept in the diaspora when we remembered Zion. How can we sing the song of the Lord while we are in a foreign land, and so on. So they now remember Jerusalem. And actually, just few months later, when Hanukkah was celebrated in Israel, one of the local artists here, Aryeh Navon, made this caricature. Here is the first government of the state of Israel, and they are bringing back the menorah to Jerusalem. You can recognize here Ben Gurion, you can recognize here maybe Golda, Dov Yosef, Sprintzak, the Speaker of the Knesset. All these are the ministers of the first government, and it's Hanukkah of that year, of 1949, and they are marching now and bring back the menorah to Jerusalem. So that menorah that they lit this night is a symbol that we are still victorious. They cannot defeat us. Okay, so let's go now to our topic after this brief introduction and speak about the Jewish communities of Italy, two in particular, and see how their ketubot were designed. I selected the two most important ones, maybe, not only because of their culture and the artistic heritage, but also because of their size. They were the two largest Jewish communities in Italy in the period that I'll be dealing with, which is 17th, 18th century, the Baroque period, in which the most beautiful ketubot were produced in Italy, or in the world, I would say. So here is a map that shows you the distribution of Jewish communities in Italy in this period. The larger the circle is, the larger the community is. Some of the most well-known are Rome and Ancona and Ferrara, Venice, of course, Mantua, Florence, and so on. So if you've been to Italy, you know, and you traveled and maybe you've seen the synagogues, the beautiful synagogues of these communities. There are no communities in this period in the south of Italy. What was very rich in Jewish life until the 1494, until the expulsion from Spain, and part of this area was the House of Aragon. So Jews of Sicily and the Jews of Puglia in the south of Italy and Calabria were exiled. So there's no Jewish life anymore in this part of the world since the late 15th century, and Jews have concentrated in central and north Italy, the Jewish communities. In many of these communities were produced amazing, beautiful ketubot that each town, I can easily give you few lectures, even not one, on each one of these towns that you see here, from which we have really some of the best ketubot that survived. It has become a fashion in Italy to illustrate the ketubah. All the families were, especially the elite ones, were doing it, but not only the elite. And there was even competition between the families over whose ketubah is more beautiful, for which family producing the better ketubah for their children. And so much so that the rabbis had to put a limit on how much one can spend on decorating the ketubah, because there was such competition that, you know, maybe it's the neighbors will be looking at the Jewish communities and with, they have too much money and things like that. So the rabbis wanted to keep away, so they put a limit on the amount one is allowed to spend on making the ketubah. So we have some from these towns, Lugo, Casale Monferrato, Livorno, Modena, Ancona. I don't know how much you know these towns. Livorno, probably most people would know. And I just want to show you in a map where they are. It's not so important, but anyway, Casale Monferrato is in Piemonte, not far from Turin. Yes, Lugo is in Emilia-Romagna, south of Ferrara. Modena is here, also in Emilia. And Ancona is on the Adriatic Sea. It was part of the Papal State. And here is Livorno, on the beach next to Pisa. Livorno was one of, let's say, most important centers for ketubot, especially for the Sephardim who settled in Italy, and we'll speak about the composition of the Italian Jewish community in a second. But the two most important communities, as I mentioned before, were those of Venice and Rome. In both of them, in this period that I'm talking about, were ghettos. The Jews were limited to a certain quarter of the city. They were not allowed to go out of it at night or in Christian holidays, and they were guarded by Christian soldiers usually. Life is conducted in the ghetto. They could, if those who had shops, some of them could go to their shops outside the ghetto, but in the evening come back. The ghetto of Venice is the first one ever in the world that is called ghetto, and the first one in Italy. It was founded in the year 1516 and was not liberated until Napoleon liberated North Italy, 1797. So the period of the ghetto, you can see, was over 200 years. The ghetto of Rome started with the Pope. Rome is, of course, was under the Pope. It wasn't an independent state. Italy was not independent state until the 19th century, until the late 19th century. So there's no country like Italy as we think of today. There were many republics, duchies, and so on. So the Republic of Venice, this is the capital where the ghetto was, and the capital of the Papal State was the city of Rome. And here was the ghetto that started in 1555, sometime after Venice, and it's also called ghetto because by that time ghetto has become to be associated with Jewish community. It wasn't before, and I can speak about the etymology if you're interested later. And it lasted more because the Pope was more in power for longer period, and the ghetto was not abolished in Rome until 1870, long after Venice. And this, the situation in the two ghettos, the daily life, would influence also their artistic expression. In Rome, it was very poor community, very crowded one, and many people lived, in no space really for living. They were changing in the same house, several families living, sharing everything and so on. Life was difficult for the Jews of Rome because also it's the center of Christianity, and they did not tolerate so much other religions, especially not Judaism. The two towns produced amazing ketubot, as I said. I'm showing you two from the classical period. One is from 17th century Venice, on the left from the Braginski collection in Zurich, and the other one is in the Jewish Museum in Rome, and it's from Rome 1797. Now when you look at them, both of them look to you nice, pretty, but you maybe don't see any major differences between them. And what I'll try to show you tonight is how much they differ, and each one really reflects the Jewish community of that city. Let's begin with Venice, which is the oldest one. So here is the city of Venice in the 16th century, shortly after the ghetto was established. This is a map done by a German scholar who traveled to Venice, and he produced this map. It shows us the canals and so on. Venice is all surrounded by water, And here, let me show you, here in this place is the ghetto. Here is the detail of it. Okay, this is the ghetto. This courtyard is the ghetto. And in the legend you saw before here, there is a legend under the picture to explain to you every building what it is. This map was done to explain to people who come to visit in Venice. It's like a guidebook for a tourist how to visit the city. So this quarter that we see here is number 144, and the legend it says ghetto dove stano gli ebrei, the ghetto where the Jews live. Okay, so it's one quarter. You see it's all surrounded by water, and there are houses on the small island here. Here is the ghetto in another map. So we see il ghetto, actually the word ghetto, which is pronounced ghetto later, but in Venetian dialect it's ghetto, was the place, the name of this place before the Jews even arrived to there. It is still called in this way, il ghetto. Here is these are the houses, and these are the canals surrounding it. And if you look today, it did not change much. That's why it's really a must for, if you're interested in Jewish history, to visit the ghetto of Venice, because it's the one ghetto from the past that is practically did not change its structure until today. So here is in this map that I showed you from that time, and here it's from aerial view of the same section, except that now it's open. They are not. It's not limited as it was before, when there were just gateways to enter, and it was closed from all sides. This is the courtyard that you see. The courtyard here that you see. The courtyard here, or Chatzer, it was called in Hebrew. Here it is how it looks today. And these houses, you can see typical houses of the ghetto and of Venice at that time, because they were the tallest buildings in Venice, because the Jews had limited space. So if there were more families coming, they have just to build one floor over the other. So that's why we have the high rising of Venice, as they are called in the ghetto. Here is a map of the ghetto. So we're speaking about the ghetto Nuovo, which was called the new ghetto, because it was the new quarter of the where the ghetto. There were two ghettos, and this was the newer one. Not because the Jews were newer there, but this was the old name again. So it's, you see it where it's marked in this color, like pink almost, is the ghetto Nuovo, where the Ashkenazim and Italian Jews lived. The Italian Jews, meaning, or the Italiani in Italian, were Jews from ancient times that have been in Italy. And the Ashkenazim, that were called the Tedeschi, were Jews from Germany. Tedeschi means Germans, that crossed the Alps and came to settle in Italy, in Venice. So this is their ghetto, all surrounded by canals. There were two gates. One gate is here, one gate is here, and they were closed at night, as I said, and on Sunday, on Christian holidays, and there were boats, gondolas, going around the ghetto to guard. When the Sephardim arrived later, a new ghetto is established for them. It's called the Old Ghetto, Ghetto Vecchio, because that was the old neighborhood, and they lived in more spacious section of the city, and we'll speak about the Sephardim in a second. The Sephardim meaning the Jews from Iberian Peninsula. Here is a typical synagogue in the ghetto. There are 5 synagogues that you can still visit until today in the synagogue. And that synagogue was according to the community that settled in the ghetto. I mean, they were like Jews from different parts of the world. So each community has its own ritual, its own nusach, as we say. And here's the synagogue of the Italiani Jews, of the Italian Jews. You can, by the way, recognize immediately it's a synagogue because the windows are very large, and there are 2 floors and not more floors, and the building is supposedly more stately, although not really. There's no facade with 10 commandments or things like that. It was the glory was inside, not outside, but from outside even you can recognize Here's another picture of it. The synagogue of the Ashkenazim, here is the entrance to it. Today it serves as the museum of the community. It says Museo, and it says in Hebrew here, בית הכנסת הגדולה כמנהג אשכנזים. The large synagogue according to Ashkenazi style or ritual. Okay, and the Jews were not only had their own synagogues, but they had their own professions. Each of the communities were allowed by the Senate of Venice to have only certain professions, not every profession. So, for example, the Ashkenazim, one of their, let's say, most important professions was money lending, and they had banks. So here is one of the banks that still survives today in the ghetto, near the Chabad house. Those who visited the ghetto, it's called Banco Rosso, the Red Bank. Still, you have there was the shop here of the bank here. For example, someone who was called Del Banco is from some families that were money lenders, or Meshulami in Hebrew, and so on. So you have one bank. For example, the Italiani were dealers in second-hand items, and so on. So they had their own professions that were dictated to them by the Venetian Senate. Now, we come to speak about the wedding. I gave maybe too long introduction, but I want to have the setting. The wedding in Renaissance and Baroque Italy was a big event, like it is today, but of course differently. And we can learn a lot about the wedding as it was from Italian art of the time, and not necessarily weddings of particular couples, but from biblical images. That's the way to learn about daily life, often in the history of art. So here's two paintings by two great Renaissance artists of the wedding of the Virgin Mary. But they show it as it was the wedding of the time. So one is on the left is Perugino, and on the right is Raphael, his students, and both of these images show the wedding. And we can see, I want to show details. Here is from Perugino. How was the wedding? The hype, actually, since it's the wedding of the Virgin, is like the biblical story is told here, the biblical Christian story. So they were married according to Christian tradition in the court of the Temple of Jerusalem. This is the high priest, who what he is doing is uniting the right hands of the two. Do you remember this from last week when I spoke about the Roman marriage in antiquity? And this is how it was still done in Italy, when here is the right hand of the Mary, and the right hand of Joseph. The high priest is uniting them. Here is in the painting of Raphael the same. The high priest, the bridegroom, the bride, and that's how weddings were conducted. Raphael even shows women on one side, men on the other side, maybe so Jewish weddings. So this is the Italian wedding. I'm showing the Italian wedding, not the Jewish one, because what you'll see in the ketubot, it's like all the time this combination of Italian culture with Jewish one. Like in this painting, in a way, because this is a Jewish couple after all that Raphael is showing, but he's mixing the ways of wedding that were in Italy with what he knew from either the Bible or from the Jewish community of his time. Behind, by the way, behind the two is the Temple of Jerusalem, because this wedding supposedly between Mary and Joseph took place in the courtyard of the temple. And the Temple of Jerusalem that you see Raphael painted here, let me go back to the original painting so you see what I'm talking about. This building here, behind them, okay, is modeled on the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. And all this is going on at the same time in Renaissance Italy. There were travelers who have been to Jerusalem, and they came with these images that show the Temple Mount, and they believe this is the Temple of Antiquity. And Raphael wants to show the Temple of Antiquity. Even signed his name here, Raphael Urbinas, and wrote the date, 1504. Okay, so let's now see the Jewish wedding in this time. The Jewish wedding, we can learn from Hebrew manuscripts of North Italy. Some of them survived, like this one that is the Rothschild Miscellany today in the Israel Museum. It has many, many episodes. It's a beautiful one of the most beautiful Hebrew manuscripts ever produced, very large with almost 1,000 pages on vellum, on very thin parchment, certainly commissioned by very wealthy Jew. And it has several miniatures that deal with the wedding, and I want to show you how much it is Jewish and Renaissance. So, for example, one thing that was allowed in Italy that was not allowed in any other European community is mixed dancing in the wedding. So we see here it's a piyut for the wedding, this piyut that begins here, Ayached. You see the musicians, and you see three couples are dancing hand in hand, men and women. This was something that could not be tolerated in Ashkenaz, for example, not even among the Sfaradim in public. So this is Italian Renaissance, really. It's something that is unique to Italian Jews to show wedded couples dancing together. And here is now the actual marriage ceremony, and we see the rabbi dressed in this beautiful gown with gold embroidery, and is uniting the right hands of the bride and the bridegroom. This is, by the way, an Ashkenazi couple, so they are fully dressed and covered from bottom to top, very pious. She has something on her head. She doesn't show her hair, so it's definitely a Jewish couple, an Ashkenazi one in Italy. Here is how the Italian Jews got their marriage. Here are two manuscripts, again both from North Italy, that speak about the laws of wedding, of marriage. It begins with lo tov, it meaning it's not good for a man to be by himself, he should take a wife. These two manuscripts, and they show wedding episodes. Let me show you a detail from this one that is on the left. Here is the detail, and we see the rabbi here, and this Italiani couple. She is not covered, the hair is not covered, his hair is not covered, and he is putting the ring on her finger, his right hand on her right hand. And the rabbi is uniting the right hands. And look how beautifully they are both dressed. And here they are dancing together. After the ceremony, the first dance is given to the bridal couple, and they dance together while the orchestra is playing on the balcony here. Now, in these beautiful weddings that we had in Renaissance Italy, Jewish weddings, we can ask how their ketubot looked like. And apparently they looked very non-impressive, very simple. I'm showing you here two from this period, one from Padua, one from Cremona, that survived, and both are written elegant script, and everything is nice about them, but they are not decorated, because the custom in Italy at that time was not to do anything besides prepare the ketubah and hand it to the bride. No one knew what is written here except the families. There was not something public about it. And actually during the wedding, it was handed to the bride. Here is the bridegroom, handing it rolled. It's like a scroll. No one could see it, and here she holds it as a scroll, and it's telling her, this is the custom in Italy. Here is your ketubah according to the law of Moses and Israel. Yes, he is giving her and these are the two witnesses. So there's nothing was shown. This will all change when the Sephardim, after the expulsion from Spain, come to settle, some of them, in northern Italy. The Sephardim were first of all very rich, those who came into Venice, because the Venetian Senate would not accept any Sephardi Jew, only those that were of the elite, merchants, because they wanted them to help the economy of Venice. So and they gave them another profession that was not the profession of the Ashkenazim and the Italiani. They were to become international traders, and this is something totally different. They are now supposed to boost the Venetian economy because they have connections in Constantinople, Istanbul, yes, Izmir, Salonika, Amsterdam. There's all these connections that they can do, and they help the Venetian economy. That was the idea here. So we can see a wedding of the Sephardim in the ghetto of Venice. It's a very luxurious wedding. It's still like almost what we saw in the Renaissance with the Italiani. And the Rebbe is reading the Ketubah to the couple. This is the couple here, and this is behind them is the chuppah that is not portable. It's a fixed chuppah in the synagogue. Until today in the Sephardi synagogue in the ghetto of Venice, you can see a fixed chuppah, and there is an orchestra playing. And so some visitors who visited the Sephardi community in this period, of the Baroque period, were amazed of how wealthy these people are. And they said, one of them, John Evelyn, a visitor from England, wrote in his diary, I never saw in England beautiful women like those Sephardi women, and their jewelry outdoes whatever our noble women here in London do. Yes, I mean, they were so impressed by them. Anyway, so, and the Sfaradim brought new customs. For example, the custom that they had, that we spoke about last week when we spoke about wedding in the Muslim lands, to read the Ketubah in front of everybody. So here we see a picture now of a Sephardi wedding in northern Italy. It doesn't specify in which town. And I want to show you the detail. The couple is here, and they read from the Ketubah, and everyone can see it. Yes, now here is it's not rolled like it was before. So they brought this tradition, the Sephardim, of giving the marriage contract a new, let's say, place in the Jewish wedding. It's now a piece of art. It can become a piece of art. So the Italian Jews before and the Ashkenazim were not aware of this tradition because it wasn't part of their heritage. So the earliest ketubot that we have after the expulsion from Spain of Sephardim are from Venice, from the Sephardim of Venice. And they look, I want to show you some of them. Here is one. And they look very much Sephardi. I didn't have time last week to speak about Sephardi ketubot, but you can see here, first of all, one thing that you notice, and this is important to pay attention to, there are two sections to the ketubah. One is the actual marriage contract, the ketubah, and the other one are special conditions. Special conditions that are drawn between the two families, and the Sephardim list them on the ketubah. They don't write them on a separate document like the Ashkenazim, and they read them aloud as well. And these tnaim are very detailed. They tell you everything that you want to know about the status of these families, about their wealth, about the shops that they have, about whatever possessions they have, and so on and so forth. Here is another one. So you see, these are all the earliest ketubot, Italian, illustrated. Earliest Sephardi ketubot, illustrated after the expulsion. And you see how much they share together. They have two sections of text, and the text is set inside an arcade of two arches, and the arches look like a keyhole, like a horseshoe, like what we call Moorish arch. Moorish arch is a type of arch that is Islamic, that was popular in medieval Spain. Yes, here is a detail. 1 second, I'll come back to it. I want to show, for example, the synagogue in Toledo that was built in this style with these Moorish arches. Yes, and like the Alhambra and so forth and so on. Let me go back. Let's see the details. In this arch, here we see the ketubah section. And so, the names of the bride and the bridegroom were written in gold letters. Now the gold is gone, and you can see just yellow, but there were gold leaf here. And this name, notice, Avraham Abrabanel, of course, very typical Sephardi name. And she is Mrs. Donna Gracia, like Donna Grazia, daughter of Aaron de Paz. Their names are written in gold. And the dowry that she brought is the dowry that at the time when I was working on these materials for my doctoral studies, I went to see how much people made in this time, and the amount of the dowry is about 20 years of work of even the Rabbi of Venice. It's several thousand Venetian ducats when the salary of the rabbi of the community was about 250 per year. So you can imagine these are huge dowries that they're bringing, and they are decorated. All these designs, as I said, are typical Sephardi. The script is a Sephardi script. The names are Sephardi, and many other things. Even the way that they write the name of the city reflects Sephardi pronunciation. They write Venezia with Zayin, while the Ashkenazim write with Tzadi, Venezia, because it's influence of German or influence of Spanish on the two ways. So here we have two. This is a Venetian ketubah, and this is Bible for medieval Spain. It's not a ketubah on the right. It's a Bible, the Kennicott, famous Kennicott Bible, that is in England, a Sephardi Bible before the expulsion. And it's clear that the artist who made this ketubah in Venice has this tradition, artistic tradition, that he continues now in Venice. And what's interesting is now the Italiani and the Tedeschi, the Italian and the Ashkenazim of Venice, are so envious of the success of the Sephardim that they start to imitate them. And so here we have an Ashkenazi ketubah, an Ashkenazi Venetian ketubah, that is with only one arch because they are not named, but otherwise it's in the style of Venetian ketubot. And even probably a Sephardi scribe wrote it. From the names I can tell, but there's only one arch. Also, they are not named because it's an Ashkenazi ketubah. So it becomes like a disease, you can say, and the two other communities in Venice start to imitate the Sephardim. And so by the end of middle of the 17th century, we have illustrated ketubot in Venice of all the communities. We can see now also how the art is changing very quickly, because Italy is not a place that you can stay indifferent in, when you see all the great art that is produced. So while the first ketubot of the Sephardim were very much still, let's say, reminiscent of what was in Spain, now they are Italian. This is of the second generation of the children of the immigrants, and it's now done not Moorish arches, but Italian arches, Baroque Italian arches, like we see for example, on the Torah arcs from Venice, like this one. There is a lot of gold, and there are peacocks, and there are animals that were not shown before, and so on. So, and still we have the two arches. It's still of a Sephardi family. The details, so you can see how, for example, this is a pillar with decoration in stucco, and here it's how it's imitated in the ketubah. Let's take one and a little bit more detailed analysis, and then maybe I'll switch to Rome because I see we are running out of time. So now of the second generation, as I called it, 1649, this ketubah on the left, that is, by the way, in Los Angeles, in the Skirball Museum. And I want to compare it to a Venetian church. By that time, by 1649, Venetian art is so important that the artist cannot stay, indifferent to what's going on. So I want to claim that this ketubah is imitation of this facade of a church that is one of the most important churches in Venice, Santa Maria de' Miracoli, planned by one of the great artists, the architects of Renaissance Venice. And so, you notice, and maybe it's clear, but I want to point out, you see that round arches like you have here. Here you have two, only you need two, but here you have many more. There is a gateway here below. There's a gateway in the church. There is what we call the lunette, the upper part that is round, and the upper part that is round. Here are statues of the saints of the church, and here are two figures. Here are windows, one central window and two smaller ones. Here is one big one and two smaller ones. It's clearly this artist is looking at the Christian art of his time, but this is what Venetian Jews like to do, Judaizing it. Let's see the details. Okay, here's the gate that I mentioned to you. Let's see enlarged. And now on this gate it says, זה השער לאדוני צדיקים יבואו בו. This is the gateway to the Lord. It's not the gateway to a church. It's a gateway for Jewish couple to come through it, because once they get married, they become holy. It's like the ceremony is called kiddushin, sanctification. Yes, I mean, so if you come, this is the symbol of the minute of the marriage. You transform from being unmarried to being married and starting to build a family and so on. So it's very symbolic the way the artist is interpreting that. Here is the upper section of this contract. You see the zodiac cycle, and it's actually, you can see very well, it's a Jewish artist. It begins with Aries for the month of Nisan, which is considered the first Hebrew month in the ancient Jewish calendar, and it proceeds from right to left and ends with Pisces for the month of Adar. So it goes from right to left. It's certainly by a Jewish artist. The question is why the zodiac? I'll reply it in a second. And then you have allegorical figures that replace the Christian saints that were in the church. Okay, so here is one allegory of a farmer. You see he's holding a bag of seeds and implements to work in the field. And it's allegory taken from Christian art of prophet, and the verse that is written above him from Ecclesiastes, sow your seed in the morning and do not be idle in the evening, is understood in the Talmud of how many children one should have. Bet Hillel says at least one son and one girl. Others say no, maybe more sons and so on. And there are discussions about it. But this verse is the basis for this discussion. That in the evening you should not be idle, meaning to produce children. Yes. In the day you work, but in the evening don't forget your mission in life, because the meaning of Jewish family is to have children, is not to stay a nun or a monk and not marry and not have children. Okay, so this is allegory for the husband telling him what is supposed of him. And here is the allegory for the wife. And the allegory is of femme, of fama in Italian. And the verse that is written, Tov Shem Ishem and Tov, a good name is better than precious oil, is like while the husband is taking care to produce children, she has to keep the good name of the family. Yes, it's very not feminist, but that's how it was. And by the way, the allegory is shown because she's blowing a trumpet to announce the good name, yes, to make it famous. And so in the center, now the zodiac signs. Why the zodiac signs? Because the wedding was supposed to be b'mazal tov. B'mazal tov, if I translate it to English in literary way, means under good constellation. May the stars be with you. May the day of the wedding be good. Actually, all the weddings in Venice, and not only in Venice, were calculated always to be in the first 15 days of the Hebrew month, when the moon is still increasing, because it's a good sign from heaven. So no, you won't find any Jewish wedding before 1800 in Italy that is in the second half of the Hebrew month, because it's a bad sign. So astrology was very important. And we know that in the ghetto of Venice was a full-time astrologer. When a child was born, you see, a child is born, the astrologer is called to look in heaven and see what is the fate of this child. And they would put even the zodiac signs on amulets to protect the childbirth and so on. So you see the zodiac signs, these are amulets for childbirth, so that the child is born in Mazal Tov, Siman Mazal Tov, under good constellation. Inside the here, yes, I mean the labyrinth that you see here is written. It's very hard to see, and now it's enlarged much more than the actual item. Is written the entire book of Song of Songs in micrography, as we call it, in a labyrinth. It begins here, Shir Hashirim Asher L'Shlomo, all in square letters, continues on all three, and this is a symbol which is also an expression in Italian, the knot, K-N-O-T, of love. The knot of love. Love has no beginning and no end, and this song of love, Shir Shirim, a song of the lover to his bride, is now become to be this emblem that is shown here. In later Venetian ketubot, they will write it even more in a different way. The same labyrinth is painted, and they quote now a verse from the book of Song of Songs. My beloved is like a bundle of myrrh to me, and the bundle of myrrh in Hebrew can be also be understood as a labyrinth. Yes, so they knew Hebrew very well, they knew Italian very well, and they knew the traditions of both, let's say, cultures, and they combined them. Yes, okay, I'll skip that because it's too complicated to explain the Hebrew here. And also there are coat of arms. I mean, these elite Sephardi families in particular started this tradition to insert into the ketubah the coat of arms of the two families. I mean, they were not official coat of arms, but since they were very rich, they wanted to show that. So one is of the bridegroom and one is of the bride. And again, while taking it from Christian population, from Christian nobility of the time, they, let's say, justify this or Judaize this by writing verses from the Bible about sort of heraldry. I mean, they are not really about that. But for example, here it's written, you have given me the shield for your salvation. The shield is understood as the shield of the hair, of the coat of arms. Yes, I mean, they took these verses, and so they want to show that it's, you use it, but it's really coming from us, from the Bible. And almost all Italian Venetian families had their own coat of arms, and you can see by the time that this image here was prepared, all Jewish families, I mean, of all communities are having a coat of arms. For example, Uziel is Sephardi, Curiel is Sephardi, Foa is French, Gentile is Italian, Herrera is Sephardi, Finzi is Italian, Guetta is Sephardi, and so on. Sulam is Luzzatto is Ashkenazi, from Lausitz in Switzerland they came, and so on. So they all adopted this coat of arms, and each one has its own emblem that they would put on the ketubah, on Esther's call, in the cemetery, in the Lido, for those who visited. Okay, I'll skip now to Rome because we are running out of time. And I want to show you some of what happened in Rome. You can understand that Venetian ketubot have become more and more, let's say, sophisticated, more and more important. As long as the ghetto continued, they continued to flourish and became also a source of influence for communities in other parts of Italy and also in faraway communities, especially Sephardi ones. For example, in Amsterdam, in Dubrovnik, in the island of Corfu, we find Venetian types that were taken by merchants and redone in these towns that I mentioned. Let's go now to Rome for the time that we have and see what was the situation under the Pope. So here we are in the ghetto of Rome until today. And by the way, the Jews have lived on the bank of the Tiber, which is here. This is the bridge over the Tiber. And here is the ghetto, colored in yellow. Here is where the synagogue is standing today. They've lived on the bank of the Tiber from antiquity till our time. The longest Jewish community in Europe that is in constant, let's say, no break in their history from the antiquity till today. Okay, it's really very amazing to have a community that still exists. And by the way, there are some Jewish families in Rome that say they came to Rome with Titus. I mean, they have their tradition, these families, like the Pomis and so on. I don't have now to mention all of them, but anyway, they have this tradition that are from the exiles that were brought to Rome by Titus, and they carry this tradition until today. Okay, so here is the synagogue of today, and here is the Tiber, And this is the same place that I showed you a second ago. So the new synagogue that is modern, is only late 19th century. It was built in the same spot where the older synagogues were before the time of the ghetto. This is emancipation already. But to show you how life in Rome was different, I selected this church that is inside the ghetto. Was built by purpose by the Pope inside the ghetto to convert Jews. Yes, he knew he's doing a crime, but he did not care. He wanted to convert the Jews to become Christians. So they built a church into which the Jews were forced to come on every Sunday and listen to the sermons of the priest. And the entrance of this church is written in Hebrew and in Latin because the Jews can read it, and they selected a verse from the Bible to show how stubborn are the Jews and how they should repent. Yes, here is the verses from the Isaiah that is written here in Hebrew, and you can see it in Latin on the other side. I have spread my hands, meaning God, all the day onto a rebellious people, meaning the Jews, who walk in a way that is not good after their own thoughts, a people who continuously provoke me to my very face. As if it's said by God to the Jews. That's how Christians and the Pope understood this verse, and this church in the ghetto of Rome. And for example, there were carnivals in the time that I'm talking about, Christian carnivals. And part of the carnival was to put Jewish children or Jewish boys in this barrel and roll it in the streets and mock him and so on. There were many of these anti-Semitic things that were going on in Rome that, of course, in Venice were different because the Venetians were not so religious like in Rome. So the ketubot of Rome, in a few minutes I want to show you how different they are from those of Venice. First of all, they are shaped in a different way. You will immediately recognize them because the bottom part of the Roman ketubah is always pointed. By the way, I didn't mention that, but all the Italian ketubot are made from parchment, from a skin of one animal. For each ketubah, one animal was slaughtered. Of course, they ate the meat and so on, but you needed an animal because every ketubah has the size of the animal, 60, 70, 80 centimeters, depending on the size of the animal. And so the section that is either shaped at top or at bottom is the area of the neck of the animal. Okay, so in Rome it was the bottom part. This is the oldest ketubah from Rome that is today in the Jewish Museum in Florence. And it has, let me show you what is typical to Rome in the text first, and as we go to the illustration. First it says, Po Roma matade adval nar Tevere. Here in Rome, which is situated on the Tiber River, like we saw in the Geniza ketubot. And the river Tevere, as I mentioned, Tiber, is the place where the Jews have been living for 2,000 years. Then they believed in Rome that every ketubah is coming from the Bible. Although I don't mention the Bible, they write mideoraita, that is from the Torah, all the rules of the ketubah. And the other thing they had to do in Rome, which is not in Venice, every ketubah had to be taken to the office of a notary, of an official notary of the Papal State, and signed there, and they write the name of the notary in the ketubah. And everything is according to the document, which was done in the officio, in the office of Conti. This is the name of the Christian notary. It's written in every ketubah according to the notary that they took it to. Okay, now, the bottom part of the Roman ketubot, as I said, is pointed, and if you look close up, you'll see a hole here, yes, where I'm pointing at the bottom. Those that's here, okay? Those that survived complete, very few of them, they show that there was a ribbon here. Because what was done in Rome, after they read the ketubah, they rolled it from top to bottom, and this was to tie it and give it to the bride, rolled like I showed you before. Some Roman ketubot have beautiful micrography, as we call it, using Hebrew script in very tiny letters, and they want to show a detail from this Roman ketubah. and that has all the 5 Megillot written on one contract. Let me show another detail so you would believe me, this all Hebrew script, what we see. So all 5 books, all 5 Megillot are written on one contract. Look at the beauty of this. What is typical of Rome, which is of great interest, and maybe show you some examples so that you understand this, and then we can have some questions, is that they put allegories, but unlike Venice, the allegories were taken directly from Italian art and with no attempt to Judaize them. They've just selected whatever was available to the artist without the ability to invest in it so much thought and, let's say, ideas taken from Jewish sources to make it something different. So what we see in many Roman ketubot are these allegorical figures that are all surrounding the borders of the ketubah. And by the way, they are not naim in Rome, so it's only one column of text. Let me show you details. Okay, so when we see that they're not only not thinking of what they are taking, they did not even try to give the allegory a Jewish, biblical, Talmudic name. It's written, the allegory is illustrated, and its name is written in Italian. Yes, Vittoria, victory, temperanza, temperance, speranza, hope. Yes, and so on. So they just put the allegories, and maybe a Christian artist was doing it for them. I think in most cases that was the case. Yes, here you can see the details. Vittoria, victory, she's holding the laurel and the flower here. Speranza, hope, is holding the anchor, which is a symbol of hope. Yes. So this was very popular in Rome at the time, to have allegorical figures, paintings by Roman artists of the time, of the Baroque and especially Renaissance, late Renaissance, Baroque period, were filled with allegorical figures. Like here, all these are allegorical figures. I don't have time now to detail all of you. Or if you go in the streets of Rome, all these fontana, all these fountains that you see by Bernini, by other artists, like these two figures. Here's the Fontana di Trevi, the famous one with the coins. Yes, if you've been to Rome. Here, these are two allegorical figures. I mean, they are filled. Rome is filled with these figures. One is Salute and one is Abbonanza. And so there were guidebooks of how to illustrate them that were printed locally. So here's this guidebook that is called Iconologia by Cesare Ripa. And the Jewish artist or the Christian artist that illustrated for Jews just copied from this book. So here's the Iconologia of Cesare Ripa, the allegory for abundance, and here she is illustrated, and here is in the Ketubah. So they just copied from this book without changing it, Judaizing, making it, giving it Jewish context, and so on. So for example, here's this fragment of Ketubah from Rome, shows this figure. When I saw this Ketubah for the first time, I said, what is this woman is doing? There is the zodiac cycle around there. She has a compass. What it has to do with the Ketubah? And then I found in the book of Ripa, this is the allegory of perfezione, of perfection. So maybe they want the bride to be perfect woman. I don't know why they selected that, but only with this guidebook you can tell what it is, because not always the names are written. And sometimes we even have nude figures. Yes, here's the allegory in the Ketubah. Yes, for marriage contract, Jewish, rabbinical one, with signatures of rabbis. Look at the beauty of this woman. This allegory of justice, blindfold with the scale. But this allegory of beletza, of beauty. Yes, I mean, look how they were not very, let's say, following Jewish tradition here. The most popular, maybe I'll end with this allegory, is this allegory that appears in many, many Roman ketubot, that the name in Italian is Concordia Maritale. Concordia Maritale means harmony in marriage. And it shows a couple, a bridegroom and a bride, are united by a chain of gold. Okay? And there is a heart in the middle. If you open, here is the detail. Okay? if you open the book of Chedreripa, he explains that this image means that the chain of gold means that they cannot divorce. They are united forever, and the heart is one, becoming one, and so on. He explains here in the Italian the meaning of this Catholic allegory. And this Catholic allegory, because in Judaism you can divorce, and the ketubah is about divorce, because if you divorce your wife, as I explained last week, you have to pay her everything that is listed here and so on. But this has become the central allegory for the wedding. It appears on hundreds of Roman ketubot in different style. Yes, I want to show a few, and even the 19th century, when they're modernized. Okay, so you can see that how Rome was different, and I think the situation there took us for that. I'll skip some. I just want to show you at the end what is done today. Roman ketubot have become very simple by the end of the 19th century. Like the rest of Italy, with emancipation, Jews were not so interested to illustrate ketubot anymore. And the wedding day has become Sunday, like the Christians. Before it was never on Sunday. Their weddings were always on Wednesday. And so it almost died, this art, until our time, when there is now, in recent years, a revival. And there is an exhibition that was a few years ago in the Jewish Museum in Rome, and I contributed an essay as well to it, and you can see the picture from my essay that you just saw was in the cover of that book. And the editor of the book, of the catalog, is this guy, Rabbi Amadeo Spagnoletto, a good friend of mine, the only sofer today in Italy, the only scribe, and he revives the art of the ketubah of Italy in our time. He's in love with this material, like I am, as you can imagine. And I want to show you two of the creations of Amadeo. One is for a Venetian Jewish couple of today, the wedding was just a few years ago, and one of Roman couple, and both are by Amadeo. So we have one artist that is now creating in both traditions and bringing these traditions alive again, and based on the old ones. He purposely does not want to create new motifs and so on. He loves what was in the past, and he redoes it for the couples that get married today in Italy. Okay, so I'll stop here, and if you have any questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Sabar. We have a lot of questions, actually,
okay,
and
this
I know
pleasure,
our time is super limited, so I might actually send some of them by email to you.
Okay, no
but
problem.
Because they were so beautiful, did people display them like people display them today? Was it, a sign of wealth?
Not at all. Unfortunately, after the wedding, it was shown during the wedding. After the wedding, it was put in a cabinet by the mother of the bride usually, and was not displayed in the living room.
Okay.
Was not. This is a modern tradition to have your ketubah displayed in the room for the guests to see and so on.
And I noticed in some of the older ones, and the ones that were just written, there was two languages. So when did Aramaic become the language of the ketubah? And what were the two languages displayed?
Those in Latin letters, you mean, that you saw?
Yeah.
In Latin letters, in some communities, they were forced to show to the authorities and to have a full translation or a short one of the contract. And so that's how marriages were registered. So the translations are to Latin or to Italian, because that was something forced on the community, and they had to go to a notary to translate.
And what about when was Aramaic the language of the ketubah?
Okay, the Aramaic is the language of the ketubah is basically Aramaic. But all the conditions, all the additions, the dowry are in Hebrew or in a local dialect. It can be Ladino, can be Judeo-Arabic, depending on which communities. But only the basic text of the past is in Aramaic. No new additions in Aramaic. Like in Venice, all the conditions are in Hebrew. They're all in Hebrew of the time, with some Italian terms, some Venetian terminology for items of jewelry and so on that they did not know the Hebrew names for them.
Have you ever come across a case, because they are so beautiful and so intricate, where the ketubah has been reused?
Have been what?
Reused?
Definitely. That was, and every question that you ask, we need the whole lecture. In the case of this case, what you're asking, it's very interesting that in Italy this was done very much so. I mean, what happened? There are a few things. One is that, let's say, the 19th century descendants of the original couple would cut the original text and replace it with a new one because the border was so beautiful. But by the 19th century, there were no artists around who could do this, so they would just remove it and put a new text. That's one. Another system was to erase all the text with a knife and write a new text over it. And so on. There are some other traditions that they did that are sometimes funny because you see in catalogs of like auctions of Sotheby a Renaissance ketubah or the 17th century, let's say, and the text is from the 19th and they don't know, cannot understand what's happening and so on. And this is because of this, what I'm saying.
And thank you for telling us about Amadeo. Is there anything known about the artists from the Renaissance period, the artists of those periods?
Okay. First of all, I want to tell you that if you visit Italy, you can very easily see Amadeo. He's today the director of the Holocaust Museum in Ferrara. Mm-hmm. So if you are in Italy, go to Ferrara, to the Jewish Museum of Ferrara. Amadeo is now the director. He is originally from Rome, but he moved to Ferrara and he now is the director. Anyway, so in the period of the past, most ketubot are unsigned. I would say about 5% of, let's say, few thousands Italian ketubot that survived are signed, meaning about maybe a few hundreds or less. And in some cases, these are non-Jewish artists. In most cases, these are Jews. Because let's say in Venice, in the ghetto, there were people, good craftsmen, Jewish craftsmen, that were producing Esther scrolls, ketubot, and actually they were producing many, we know. I didn't have time to show that. I can tell, for example, let's say even if there is no signature, that this, let's say 20 ketubot, were produced by the same hand in a studio in Venice. Mm-hmm. He would not fill the names or the text, this would be filled later. But this studio were making because there was a big demand. Also from people traveling, let's say, coming from Amsterdam, they would buy the contract that is ready in Venice, and then the text would be filled in Amsterdam by a sofer in Amsterdam.
Thank you so much, Professor Sabar.
It's a pleasure. Chag Sameach, everyone, and enjoy the holiday, and don't despair. I mean, we should win.